this beautiful Sunday night, we are coming to you live from our Nile Serena studios. This is Perspective with Josephine Karunji.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We are coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, Nile Room. Now, a lot of young people want to go abroad and make a life for themselves there, or maybe just to even study and then come back at some point in their future. What are they doing when they get there? How are they networking? How are they connecting with other people? Are they prepared when they decide to eventually come back home? Well, that's the point of our discussion tonight, and I'll introduce my guests very quickly. I'll start with Amos Wekesa, who is right next to me. He is the founder, Great Lakes Safaris and Uganda Lodges Limited. Amos, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Are we supposed to shake?
I don't know, we've already done it, so it goes. And then, of course, there's Beatrice Kayanja, who is the president of East African European Convention. Beatrice, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Badru Ntege, who is currently the chairman and chief executive officer of NFT Consult Limited in Uganda. He has many years' experience working in the ICT sector. He is an active contributor to a number of ICT-related public and private organizations in the East African region. So just before we start our show, welcome, Badru. Just before we start our show, let's play a clip from a lady that we spoke to earlier this week, and she was sharing her experience living abroad.
My name is Elizabeth Ntege. I am the director and co-owner of a company called NFT Consult, and I live and work here in Uganda. Funny enough, I was born in England. So when I was young, my parents moved both me and my brother back to Uganda because they're Ugandans. And so I grew up and went to school in Uganda. But after my A-levels, I had the opportunity to go back to England to do my degree in engineering. When I completed that, I started living and working permanently in the UK. So I lived there for about 15 years before I decided to move back to Uganda. There was one main reason why I decided to come back to Uganda. The main one was I had a daughter, and she was 4 at the time. I really did not want her to grow up in the UK. I wanted her to grow up in Uganda, surrounded by my family and my friends. So it was really a decision we made that we were going to bring up our children in this country as opposed to outside of Uganda. So, so 14 years ago, I gave up my job. I was working as an engineer with British Telecom. I sold my house, sent back my company car, packed and brought my daughter back to Uganda. So my husband and I have been living and working here permanently for 15 years. For me, family is important, and I also am lucky that my dad and mom are still living. So one thing about the people who live abroad, they will tell you they hate those midnight calls telling them somebody has passed on and everything. So for me, it was a case of, I don't want that. I don't want to hear one day that my dad passed on, my mom passed on, and I hadn't seen them. So it was important for us to come here. So both me and my husband, both our parents are still living and staying here. Secondly, I knew even if I was working in a very good company, British Telecom is one of the biggest telecom companies in the world. I had a very good job. I would never make a difference. I'm very, very passionate about women in business, making a difference in my society. I would never have had that opportunity to do that in Uganda. In England. In terms of ethics and work, I would definitely would love to do that. There's a lot of opportunity in the United Kingdom because, of course, it's the first world as opposed to Uganda. So NFT Consult has a total of 9 branches all over East Africa. But what would I bring from there? The work ethic, basically. The level of education, yes. In general, but food, whatever, no, I don't miss it. I don't miss that lifestyle at all. My advice to everybody, it wasn't easy coming back here, to be honest with you, because we didn't have a lot of information. But what I did, that I kept coming back and forth for at least 4 years. coming to visit family, going back, coming to visit family and going back. And then, so when I finally made a decision to come back, I had somewhere to start, you know. So there's a lot of information out there, but I keep telling people they need to do their own research, yeah. In Uganda, you can get taken in by your friends, even your own family. And you'd lose all, in terms of investment, you'd lose, they would take your ideas. So it is better you get what I would call formal information before you come about what, and you should be very, very clear on what you want to come and do, you know. Most people who come from abroad usually come during the winter time. You spend so much time and money in entertainment because they work so hard and they want to relax when they come here. They also know that at that time all their friends and relatives are very close to them and everybody is telling you one tale or another and you're spending a lot of money, but there's no real investment in that type of friendship. Yeah. Although you can research on the internet, you're better off actually attending and speaking to people face to face, meeting people like us who have gone through it and speaking to people face to face, tell them about what you're planning to do and they will advise you. They will give you an objective advice as opposed to coming here and relying on friends and family, because some of them have not gone through the same experience as you. Some of them are not professionals in what you're trying to do. So you're better off attending some of these conferences, some of the seminars that are given either by our embassy or other members of the Ugandan public, so that you can find out everything you need to know about moving here and starting up a business. I actually worked as a network planner with Uganda Telecom for 3 years before I gave up that job to actually start NFT Consult. Ugandans were very insular, I think, or we don't get on together, I believe. So it is better. I don't know why, or is it because we have different tribes? I don't know. But it's not something, that was a surprise for me, you know. I kept to myself, I kept to family, I kept to the few friends I made at work. Yeah, it wasn't something that I would go to a Ugandan home and who wasn't a relative to just chat and visit and plan for the future, yes. So that was a surprise for me. People going over there and now, it's actually getting harder because of immigration issues that are very tightened, of terroristic issues. It's a lot harder right now to actually live and work in the UK. Many people did many years ago when we first went there. People could do that. They were a lot welcoming, yeah. But right now it is not some place I would like people to go. And anyway, Uganda has moved in strides and leaps and bounds that we don't. What you find there, most times you find here as well, yeah. And you can go to other countries for holidays, visit, experience, especially in Asia and Dubai. There are so many other places you'd go. Currently, I can actually travel back and forth to England. At the very most, I go like once a year. Right now, I'm going more often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year because my daughter is there. But, and if I go, I only last all of 3 days, 4 days, and I'm out. I can't stand the cold. That's one reason why I came back. It's too cold. But it's also, there's so much going on and hardship, and it's getting harder and harder. So I wouldn't encourage people to live there, to move to England, unless you have a job that has been confirmed for you. And I would rather the talent of Ugandans that we have in the UK to come home. You know, there is a lot you can do.
Elizabeth Ntege and Amos is nodding throughout, like you totally agree with everything she's saying. So she says, come home, while a lot of Ugandans are packing their bags and looking for the next opportunity to leave. What are your thoughts on that? Free speaking.
Free speaking?
Yes.
No, I have been privileged to be traveling out of this country, sometimes maybe some years 9 times a year, and I've been everywhere. If you just look this year, I've been to Canada, the US, and been across the US, not just. And I've also been privileged to meet Ugandans who are living in diaspora, whether it's in the UK or in these places. I think we are just not aware of what happens out there. When a Ugandan thinks about the UK, he thinks about the Birmingham Palace, thinks about, when you think about the US, you're thinking about New York, you're thinking about things that are not exactly there. But the truth is that, I always say to my friends, if the UK was heaven, if the US was heaven, I would personally be living there. Because I can probably now afford to probably invest or buy a property and start up something there. I can, and actually have a working office in New York, have an office representation in London. So I would have probably gone there. But like she says, the truth is that there are lots of opportunities here that Ugandans have failed to tap into. A lot of Ugandans are mistaken. They think when you go out there, there's money that drops from the tree. It's easier for you to start with $200 in Uganda and actually succeed. That's what personally I think. But also, having an opportunity to be in both can be a great advantage, because I tell my friends, recently I was in LA, Los Angeles, and I met a group of Ugandans. I said, you see, it takes me flying to Los Angeles to look for clients. You guys, Ugandans, are best in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You're among the clients. And I told the guy, if you get 100 tourists in a year, we've had a chat with her as well. If you get 100 tourists coming here spending $5,000 each, do you know how much that is? It's $500,000. If 20% is your profit.
Wow. What do you guys think about coming home? I know that you're not yet back home, Beatrice.
Yes, I'm not yet back home, but I'm planning. I'm in the process after listening to Amos and Elizabeth. I think I'm at that point of coming home. I'm preparing myself. Of course, it's hard. And I think that's why we've created this East African convention, to try and create awareness for what the beautiful Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and other East African countries can offer. And yes, I think.
But I don't know if I should ask you the same question, or if it was answered when your wife spoke. That is
she
Elizabeth
spoke.
Ntege. So should I take her answers as yours?
I think yes, but also the most important thing, what we tend to forget, that home is always best. But at home, it's similar to you visiting somebody's house and coming back to your house. You have more rights in your house. You have a better understanding of what you can do in your house. So the ability that you have abroad and the challenges that you have, you're in a structure where other people are also struggling to make themselves something. When we made the decision to actually come, I had worked for one of the biggest oil companies, Texaco, for about more than 10 years after uni. And I worked with some of the best engineers that I've ever worked with. And the guy had worked in this business for 30 years before I was born, and I was in the same organization, the same job title. The best engineer I've ever worked with, an English guy. So every time I saw him, I saw me 30 years from now.
30 years from now.
And he was at home. So he had hit the glass ceiling, and here was I thinking, where else, if he cannot move beyond this, where am I going to go?
Okay. Oh, but when we hear these stories, then we think, maybe I shouldn't go. But then there's a reason why people left in the first place. Is it worth it? Why did they go?
I mean, the idea of exposure, the idea of learning, the idea of seeing something else different is always positive. And I think if somebody is going to learn the experience, the biggest problem is you must have a plan. If you go without a plan, you'll get stuck there.
Yeah.
And you must know when to give up, that this is not going to work. So you could go there with a mission to actually get somewhere, but if it doesn't work, that's the time you say, let me reset the button back home. Because resetting the button back home is 10 times easier than in a foreign land.
But I think going back to what you're saying, the idea of exposure. I've been privileged to travel. I first traveled around Uganda. That was my first dream, because when I wanted to travel, I wanted to make sure I'm able to sell my country, and that's what I do for a living.
I think, Amos, before you even continue, I think you need to spread that message to the people around this table. But as you were saying?
Absolutely. I went across the whole country, whether it's Karamoja, Ruai. I went to all corners of Uganda. It made me appreciate my own country, but also because I was in tourism. I became at a later stage, I became a tour guide. I was doing Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. I started realizing that my mistakes. If I wanted clients to be very angry about my trip, I would start from Uganda, go to Kenya, go to Tanzania. Why? Because the moment, you know, in Uganda is green, lots of water bodies, lots of mountains. Like now, it's a beautiful country throughout because of the rains. Then you go to Malaba, clients start asking Malaba, Kenya, why are Ugandans more dressed much better than Kenyans? You go to Ahero, into Kisii, you go to Kilgoris, it becomes dry. It's so dry, and the clients start complaining. So I realized, okay, if I want my clients to be happy about my trip, I had to start from Tanzania, come to Kenya, and end up with a highlight called Uganda. And I'm not saying this because I love Uganda, but it's something I learned, you know, from my trip. But exposure is important. And I want to say this because I met Bwana Badru Ntege on a plane. Traveling helps you. It opens your minds. You see, a lot of Ugandans, unfortunately, you can find a guy has been abroad so many times, but not, well, if you find a guy in Kampala, he has never been abroad, he's never been beyond Jinja, he's not been in Masaka. Let me tell you, when you travel, they say if you haven't traveled, if it's like a book, you've only read one chapter. However clever you are, exposure is important. Yeah. We start chatting with Ntege on the plane. Ntege has this big plan for Zanzibar. He's engaged in Tanzania. And I am dreaming of doing, I am one guy who is so angry that Ugandans cannot, first of all, doing a business here and succeeding is becoming a challenge. But at the same time, Ugandans don't think that they can go out to Kenya and compete. They don't think they can go to Rwanda and compete. They don't think they can go to Tanzania and compete. So as a business, of course, I have an office in Kigali. I'm just buying, I think by June I'll have a fully time bought a lodge in Tanzania. And for me, I'm thinking, Ugandans must know that when the Kenyan companies come here, at every end of month, money goes back to Kenya. How are Ugandans going to Kenya and making sure resources come to Uganda? How can we build businesses that can go beyond the borders? We must think like that. It's possible. The Kenyans doing it are just human beings like us, you know? And I saw him trying to do that. I was impressed.
I guess then that's the point of conventions like this, like what you're trying to do, Beatrice, that you bring all of these people together and do that sensitization that you spoke about.
Yes, trying to, that is why we are having the East African community or East African convention, because this brings all the East African countries together to the benefit of all of us. Single market.
This is actually going to be in August, right?
Yes, it's going to be in August, 24th to 27th. It's a 3 days conference or convention, which is really good.
What happens when they get there, and who comes there? Who is invited to come? And what do I benefit if as a Ugandan, I say, okay, I'm going for the convention, what's there for me?
People like Amos, people like Badru that have traveled, they've been exposed. They'll be able to speak and encourage some of us to return home. We'll have investors, people that want to invest back home, people that want to bring business to East Africa, but they don't know, to create that awareness.
There's also the worry, Beatrice, that a lot of these things just become social gatherings, that you just get there and you leave empty, like, why did I go?
If I might just add on, if we can add on to that, it's really what is trying to be achieved. If you look at countries like India, India became what it is for a number of reasons. So the point of exposure works, because a lot of the Indians went to the US to study, and some of them stayed. But when some of them stayed and started working in organizations, they would then make linkages back to India. That's where the India BPO sector grew. Because there were those linkages. Now most of these guys have now moved back home, and you're seeing what giant India is becoming because of that story. But what happened mainly is there was an ongoing process of two-way, that bi-directional process. But also now the exposure of the Indians that came to the UK, to the US to study, but kept the linkages of home. Yeah. These are the guys who are leading the biggest companies in the world today. If you look at Microsoft, Google, all those companies are Indians. Because of that, the value of, I think the richness that Amos talked about the culture of home, that value is an amazing advantage that we tend to forget. Yeah. So the convention brings that linkage that as much as we still have these people in Europe, and there will always be those people, we want to recycle them.
Okay.
But I think
So that we get some people
add
back.
on,
I must, just before you make your point, they're asking you to call for a break. So let's take that short break and then we'll be right back.
fantastic.
We offer professional barber, hairdressing at Lugogo Mall, Garden City, Forest Mall, Oasis Mall, and Acacia Mall. Sparkle Salon, professional, affordable, and quality services.
Welcome back. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, Nile Room. Amos, you were saying something before I cut you short.
When I met Kayanja, I told her, you know what, I've never attended any convention. I have even been one time in LA when it's happening so close, and I've not gone to it. Why? I'm in tourism business. The stories, I met one guy working at the top level for Marriott, and was telling me, Amos, we love it in the US. When Ugandans are meeting, that time is the time when Ugandans drink the highest amount of beer. Yeah, I was meeting this guy and I said, really? Can I start attending this kind of stuff? No. I think if I want to fun, I go to a national park in Uganda, have my good time. If there was serious business that is discussed, I would be able to come. Let me tell you one thing. There are so many Ugandans who are very successful abroad, but also so many who have failed.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Badru's wife talked about was inability for Ugandans to understand the value of working together. Inability for Ugandans to understand how to work. Nobody in the world has ever made $1 billion working on his own. No single person. Never. You will never make $1 billion working alone.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Why are we individualistic?
And the thing is, I don't believe that we were individualistic. You know, it's an idea of corruption. People don't understand where the origin of corruption came from in Uganda. Ugandans were not corrupt people. But in 1972, when the Asians were chased out of Uganda, we had a group of people called him after Mingi. These guys were handed over properties, investments that had been created over so many years. And all of a sudden, they had lots of money. Then we went into trouble, guys went into smuggling. People started getting money in a very quick way. And up to today, and one of our challenges started from then, even the Ugandans who are living in diaspora, a lot of Ugandans, I won't mention exactly where Ugandans, somewhere in the US, where Ugandans compete among themselves to see who has the most expensive bed, the most expensive car. Not saying the most expensive, the most valuable business. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Now, for me, the reason why I was having a discussion with her, and I was saying, okay, guys, we've made mistakes. It's time for us to rethink. When Kenyans come, Uganda, let me tell you, UNA was the first organization for foreigners living in the US formed. He can tell you how much money Indians are taking back to India. Many of the people come from different countries actually copied from UNA the idea of conversion and coming together. If you look at how much Kenyans have done, if you just look at tourism, for example, alone, Kenyans in diaspora have set up tour companies in the US, set up to do with their brothers and sisters back home. In the UK, the same. Right now, I was telling her, there's a group of guys, I don't remember the name of the hotels. There's a big chain of hotels that is growing now. It was started by diaspora, Kenyans diaspora in Kenya. It's now growing $80 accommodation. I was telling her now I met a group of Kenyans from the UK who have come back and are forming holiday homes because these guys are going to retire, retirement homes. Yeah. So they want the Kenyans who are in diaspora to come and retire. But this meeting will make sure that these guys come and the Ugandans can actually see that beyond talk and drinking and whatever, you can actually learn from these Kenyans what they're doing, Tanzanians what they're doing. Rwandese are coming back and they're running Rwanda. So
I have a question in regard to what you're saying, Amos. How are we able to work together as Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Burundi if just as Ugandans working together, we're having a problem?
That is right. As Ugandans working together, some of us may be having problems, but I think the focus is different. I'm a student of Dr. Stephen Covey, so I always think about the end in mind. Okay. When you're very clear about the end in mind, the journey becomes easy. The challenge is usually we're not very clear about our real end in mind. So any challenge along the way distracts us from what the mountaintop is. And when you tend to see, when you do an analogy with religion, our end in mind in religion is usually very clear. Heaven. So we do everything that they tell us that will get you there, right? But everything else, we don't focus. So that's why our problem tends to be that usually we don't focus on the end in mind. Now, historically, back to what Amos talked about, I think is back to the times of uncertainty. People found it very hard to plan. We need now to start really planning 5, 10 years over.
Okay.
And it's still systematic. Even very few banks give you a 10-year mortgage. So they're giving you 5-year mortgage because we're still in that space. But the business will drive that, not, you can't actually, we say you don't talk yourself out of a situation, you behave yourself out of it. So slowly, we're going to see that happen, and we're seeing it happen because the economy is actually getting, as much as people say we're in trouble, I run the 9 countries that Elizabeth told you, I'm the group CEO, so I do a lot of traveling. And I'm happiest when I land at Entebbe.
You can compare and actually tell.
Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the things that Elizabeth spoke about was the fear that a lot of people abroad have about their investments back home. So you can't trust your family, you can't trust the friends that you left behind, you can't. Are these some of the things that are going to be addressed? Because it would be really, really important to know what options people have for if I'm sending money home and I'm trying to, because we've had people jump over a building because they came back home to a house that was never there.
Yeah, yes, the whole point of this is we are trying to create that awareness for people we should stop putting in the third party. For example, what Amos said, in Kenya they are building retirement homes. You need to pay, you save, let's say you say every month, let me send £100 to that company that is building that retirement home, instead of having to go through a relative, or can you go and deposit this money for me? This is what we are going to discuss. That's why we want all these organizations, all these institutions to come and inform us so we are aware to try and prevent
the kind of problems that have been happening. Yes.
Just add on to that also, I think there's also something that happened that we don't say a lot in terms of the dual nationality options.
Yes.
So right now, and I think it's available in most East African countries, that there's ability for you to have the dual nationality. Now, earlier on, it was very hard for people to actually hold foreign bank accounts, etc. So all of that has been normalized. But also the East African community is actually really becoming more like one community. So in terms of financing, I mean, for us as an organization, our banking across the region is one bank, more or less. Okay. There are a number of banks that can move without an issue. So that has changed. Even the informal, let me send my brother money to build, that changes. You can now send money to a bank. You can now actually make a contract with a hardware supplier who delivers hardware, and you can be in any part of the world, you will pay him and he'll still deliver the hardware. Okay. So things have changed, and that's what's going on.
And maybe to add on what he just said, paying money to hardware world or to builders, I think these are the people we do want to attend so they can.
Because I'm going to fine you for publicizing all of these people and your agenda on my show.
Does it happen? Does it exist? There is a company
like that,
unfortunately. Seriously.
Yes,
I think for me what is key, and I think Josephine, thanks for hosting this kind of thing, and NTV for trying to pursue this. Of course, as tourism, we've been extremely very happy with the way NTV, for example, took on the topic of tourism. Let me tell you, you played a very key role in making sure that the government of Uganda does embrace tourism, and you're still doing that. And I can see that if we start topics like this often, we need a critical mass of Ugandan models, people that think long term. Ugandans must know that our life, what do they call it? Life expectancy has gone higher. Yeah. And a lot of people are misusing the opportunities when they're young. and they're now getting older. People are staying, you know, they're staying longer, and they realize they've wasted the time they were their children. They never invested, and they're actually very miserable. So the young generation, like people sitting in the audience here, must know that the moment when you're young, you're like a pilot 10 kilometers high. You have, when a pilot is 10 kilometers high, he has space in which, he's an engineer, can tell you space in which he can go back and forth. That's why planes don't normally crash from the air. A lot of planes crash when they're taking off and when they're landing, because you're closer to the, you know, you don't have time to maneuver. But so when you're young, use your time rightly. But also, this country has got probably the highest potential of any country in the region. History is on our side. Entebbe one time was the biggest airport in East Africa. Yeah, you had to fly when British Airways, before British Airways became British Airways, it was called British Overseas Airline Corporation. They used to land. They used to come from London into Alexandria, into Entebbe, and into Johannesburg. In 1954, when the Queen of England lost the father, she came to launch the dam, Owen Falls Dam. When she lost the father, she had flown into Uganda, gone with a small plane into Nairobi, and she had to come back here for the bigger airport in order to fly to Europe. So we have that potential. For Ugandans should know that.
And
so
now things have reversed.
Well, they're working on our airport, so let's give them that. One of the questions, and right before we take our next break, I wanted to know, Amos, you've moved around all of these places, you've met these people.
Yes.
How are they doing in trying to promote Uganda? East Africans, or even Kenya or Tanzania, or how are they doing in promoting their own countries?
They unfortunately for Kenya, Rwandese are extremely very patriotic about their country. Kenyans are extremely patriotic about their country. Tanzanians are extremely patriotic about their country. Yeah. Uganda, on the other hand, are watching Gatari Kung Fufu. That's what they discuss in London. How you see these discussions here? And I can tell you, she can tell you.
No, you can't tell us. Stop there.
There is a group of Ugandans who are actually quiet, but those that are noisy are actually watching the negative news that is coming out of Uganda. Of course, we also have a responsibility as a country to be able to showcase our own country while we're here, so that the Ugandans in diaspora can actually see positive stuff coming out of it. The reason why the Ugandans in diaspora don't like Uganda is because we're only emitting negative news.
I must say, Amos, your views are not NTV's views, but I really appreciate them. Let's take another short break, and we'll be right back.
Salons, we offer professional barber, hairdressing at Lugogo Mall, Garden City, Forest Mall, Oasis Mall, and Acacia Mall. Sparkle Saloon, professional, affordable, and quality services.
Welcome back. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center. This is a very interesting conversation. I think we got the right panel. So one of the other things that I thought we'd talk about in regard to promoting East Africa out there is looking at our products. So if, for example, I'm a bee farmer, how do I get my product onto that stage, onto the European stage? How are we going about promoting our local product?
I think the key thing that we need to look at is you can't do a sustainable export without doing a sustainable process at home. From my experience, for example, for us to be able to grow our business within the region, we first made a foundation at home and built a strong enough company at home that enabled us to actually export the brand. So we're flying the flag in these 9 countries because we have a stable home. So if you're going to make a product for export, you must create a market at home. Okay. Now, when I say market at home now, home is East Africa. Home is 150 million people that can buy your product. So until
that
we
is
have
all
that
of the
market,
6 countries?
Yes, the 6 countries.
Okay.
Because as long as it's made in Uganda, you can take it anywhere without a problem. So the most important thing is we need to start focusing on building a product that we can compete in that market. Then you upgrade it to take it abroad. But if you start off with a plan to actually export, you can't be sustainable because it's a bigger competitive market.
Okay. Okay, well, that's something to note.
Yeah, free trade.
And Beatrice, you were telling me earlier how you're going to have sort of like a fair where different products are placed, so that we see what's happening there. That will be interesting.
Yes, personally, I do arts and craft. I have a shop in London, and I promote a lot of our work, what East Africans can offer, can do, and it's beautiful. I'm always called for the ambassadors' evenings, for EU seminars, to always represent either Uganda or represent East Africa. So it's a very good way of promoting East Africa, not only Uganda, but East Africa in general.
Yes.
I must say that I like the fact that we're discussing about export. I was telling guys that we can never grow wealthy if we're inward looking. You cannot expect a tomato grower in Najana Nkumbi, who is poor, to support an onion grower in Rwakaka, my village. No. You have to look for a third party who is a good consumer, who has money to spend, and that's mainly outside the country. We are exporting products worth $2.7 billion a year. That's what we did in 2017. And we're importing products worth $5.4 billion. What this means that if you're consuming from the world market at $4.5 billion and you're only exporting half, it's a matter of time for you to collapse. It's just a matter of time you will collapse, because that guy is earning far much more from you and you're earning less from them. So it is important you have a strategy that goes out there to balance that expenditure that you're having. So as an economy, we have to think like that. But things that I can see that are key now is the formation of the national carrier. I was saying, if I had the powers and I was forming what we call Uganda Airlines, which is a good thing that government is trying to do, the first thing I would go for is a cargo planes. You look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia Airlines has got 6 big cargo planes that's supplying 34 markets. Every morning, if you go to a place called Romeo, there are 8,300 farmers that are supplying that plane every day, those planes every day, and the planes are going all over the world distributing the food, the foodstuffs, the flowers. Now, for Uganda, if you consistently start supplying avocados right now, they're very high on demand. Jackfruit is all over, the demand is higher. When the Ugandans are sure that there's a constant market, people like myself, but yourself, you guys will go into agriculture knowing that we shall consistently have a market that pays us higher. Today, Ugandans are not interested in agriculture. These kids will not go to agriculture because they have seen their parents suffer in peasant farming. Yeah, are you not talking about? Yeah. That's what number one. Now, number two, the thing that Uganda did so well, the government of Uganda, they must listen. I think it was by mistake, probably, but I hope they did by the right stuff. They had 3 PR farms, one in the UK, one in the US, and one in Germany, to simply talk about Uganda's tourism potential. And I can tell you today, if you want, for the first time in the history of Uganda, if you try to book a accommodation in Bwindi or get a gorilla permit, you almost cannot even, you will struggle even to get for next year. It has never happened like that. Wow. But every week we've been having Uganda in the media positively. Those guys have been bringing journalists right about our water bodies. You know, in Uganda, there's nothing else we can talk about. You can talk about the source of the Nile, you talk about the Rwenzoris, you talk about Lake Victoria, things that that God gave us that we're the only ones that have.
Wow. But what is our media talking about? Don't answer that. So one of the things I wanted to ask is what preparations, and when Elizabeth was talking about deciding to eventually come back home, what preparations do you make and say, you know what, I want to go back home, it's time now? And Badru, you were there, so you 20 years plus in the UK, yes, and you decide to come back home. What were the things you thought to do first? What help did you get?
The preparations is really, first and foremost, you must make that decision. You must be very clear the direction, as I keep saying, but also you must be aware that it's not going to be a smooth journey. You will get setbacks, you will get challenges, but you must do your own research, the most information, because you're actually in a better advantaged position because you have had the exposure, you can see different challenges, but when we get down here, we get seduced by the very easy options. And when you see some of our colleagues coming home, you see them taking the easy things that usually don't last long. Yet you should be looking at the more infrastructure thing. So the preparation is do some research, pick a topic that you're passionate about. something that it's not for the money, but it's the passion.
Okay.
As Elizabeth said, we're both engineers, but our business we built is human resource because we're passionate about people. So that way you do something beyond the money, but that's where you grow. It's the passion that grows the business, not the money. The money comes, but without the passion, you don't have a sustainable business.
Personally, I want to add on this. I think if I'm to return, I'd want to first save up for a home, because once you have a home, I feel you have a softer landing.
If I might challenge you on that,
Go ahead.
and I might,
I will
with
say that as well.
with the taxes, with the poll tax and everything else that they charge you in the UK or in Europe when you earn your money, and you see all these deductions coming on, right? If you don't have a home today, if you don't have enough money today over there to do it, I would like to take a bet that it's going to take another 10 years to be in a position to do that.
No, I prepare myself for that
when you
by
actually
saving.
get here, it is a lot easier to actually create a potential for you to get that value. Your dollar here gives you 3 or 4 times more than your dollar on the other side. And I took a 90% pay drop to get here.
I think what we need, I'm a businessman, and I've had this discussion
Yes.
with a lot of people.
Yes,
Assets against cash flows.
yes.
Any day, I'll take cash flows against assets, unless the assets can create you cash flows.
Yes.
And I tell people like this. I owned my own home. I bought a home where I'm staying now 5 years ago. I could have bought this home 17 years ago because I did that. But I realized that I must invest in business. When my business is stable, I can always wake up. In fact, that's what happened. I went to a bank. Somebody was failing to pay his mortgage. I got a nice house where I wanted it to be. But I was renting, I think, $200 in Zambia Estate until 5 years ago. And I could think, this guy has a house worth 400 million shillings and I'm paying 700,000 shillings a month. There's return on investment is completely not thoughtful. Recently I wrote about the person, and I was comparing him with the guy that sells me mango in Makindye. This guy goes and gets 1,000 mangoes in a day. He buys the mangoes. They come, I think, from Kenya, the seasons. I think that's also very wrong. We have fertile soils. We need to be having mangoes from Uganda.
Yeah.
So he buys mangoes at 500 shillings. He sells each mango at 1,500 shillings. Multiply 1,000 shillings times 1,000 mangoes. That guy makes 1 million shillings a day. Of course, our young people here with nice ties, I can see you guys. You think
They're lawyers.
you'll be struggling to earn 200,000 shillings from a job. And this man, you can see, I was thinking now, you have a house of 400 million shillings, and compare with this guy who's selling mangoes every day. And you could see, even from his body, poverty can be seen. The body can also tell it. Wealth, you can't hide poverty.
Let me look at the audience and see.
No, don't look at the audience.
No, but I think for me, I would think that this conference should be thinking about telling Ugandans about entrepreneurship, because you've come from a very hard environment. Let me tell you, these guys in the UK, some of them have 3 jobs for them to survive. That discipline of work, hard work, they actually have to learn to save. These people, they have to learn to work in a budget. They cannot afford to just live without budget.
I think,
So
they set the...
you save up for a home.
They set the tone that we take with them, because when they come back, and I guess that's why we have the title Basama.
Yes.
Because all that people see is the spending, what Elizabeth actually spoke
It's the
about
relief.
in the yes.
The
Yeah,
holiday.
it's a screensaver.
And so you don't really think about what life is like back home. You
It's a
just think,
holiday.
oh, they have so much money to spend.
You
Wow.
guys, those guys work hard. They're in trouble. When they come here, it's a relief, like he
Yeah,
says.
you really
You've got so much pressure. You get an opportunity to a bit show off. People may also clap your hands for you. It's the only time they do that for you.
But I'll
okay.
confess, I did it. But by the time you get on a plane, your credit card is good.
And,
Then
yeah.
by the time you get home, you've stretched it.
Exactly.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Stress reliever. Oh, okay. Well, I'd just like you all to make your closing remarks. What would you like us to pick from this conversation? And this really hasn't been just about the convention that I know you're planning. No. It's really about all of those meetings that we have, and we call different countries to come and take part in, because we're in Europe or because we're in the United States of America. We want to know people are coming, but is there value when they show up there? So I'd just like us to all make our closing remarks, and I don't know where I'll start from. If I let Amos start, we might not have time for you guys. So I'll start.
I'll start.
Yes,
I'll start. Personally, I'm not promoting Uganda because I'm from Uganda. I'm promoting East Africa, the benefits of East Africa. There's a lot we don't know. The single visa, I was at the airport. After we get the Ugandan visa, we told the lady, but we might travel to Rwanda. Oh, why didn't you tell me and I gave you the East African visa? We didn't know about that. So I'm promoting East Africa in general.
Okay, all right, Badru?
Okay, the question about the value of the conventions, and I think one of the biggest value is actually learning. I ran my business for a long time here, then 2 years ago I got involved in the discussions on the Northern Corridor, and I was one of those summits, and I learned a lot, because you actually spend 2-3 days with key decision makers within the region, and you realize, but also then you realize the power you have, that we think that we don't have the power. We as private sector actually influenced a lot in those discussions, which most people couldn't understand. But what you see today, some of the things that came out as policy, came out of a discussion of a few of us from the private sector. So there's value in coming together, primarily if the plan is good and the follow-up is even better. Yeah. So it should not be, and I'm sure it won't be just an event. It will be an event to be part of an ongoing process, which then should have the support structures to enable the mission of getting the linkages up.
And I guess this is for even any other convention, or you know, that is organized, not just one particular.
People should stop thinking
but not to forget the fun part of it.
The fun part of it.
Absolutely. I think that they must get a blessing from the political class. However, they should not make it a political thing. That's what has killed all these conventions. And as a country, we've lost so much just because something that started out well has ended up as political. You know, you have all these political parties going out there to have fun as opposed to doing business. Uganda right now needs business, needs very little politics if we are to have it.
But that is why I think my panel
I don't know why you're taking over my interview, but I'm also, those your closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing that she's trying
Conventions
to,
are
yeah,
a
the
good
conventions are supposed to be great stuff. It's a place where to learn from. And being an East African convention is important because Ugandans must know that as we open up for East African community, those Kenyans are aggressive. Those guys in Tanzania are aggressive. They will talk over the market. We must prepare ourselves to put something on the market, or else you will complain until nothing will come to it. But lastly, you need to make sure that we can have trust. Guys, let's be trusted with the little resources. If there are partnerships that come in, trust is key.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for allowing to share your thoughts on all of this with me, and I certainly hope that we actually make these conventions what they're supposed to be, and we don't use our platforms for our own agendas. Well, thank you very much. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition. Keep it NTV.
Renew your monthly basic bouquet subscription of 18,000 shillings before it expires. Then enjoy 3 free days only on StarTimes. Enjoy digital life.